The observation station had floated in the shadow of Jupiter for 300 years. It was invisible to human technology, hidden behind shields that bent light and absorbed every signal. From this silent post, the Volanthi Collective had watched Earth with the patience of beings who lived for thousands of years. Senior Observer, Shkithon stood before the viewing screen. His forearms folded behind his back. His skin was pale blue, almost translucent, and his large dark eyes reflected the image of the small blue planet that hung in the distance. To him, Earth was nothing special. Just another world filled with creatures who would probably destroy themselves before they ever reached the stars. He had watched humans for nearly 2 centuries now. He had seen their wars, their diseases, their endless conflicts over land and resources and ideas. He had watched them split the atom and immediately use it as a weapon. He had watched them poison their own air and water. By every measure, the Volanthi used to judge intelligent species. Humans were failures waiting to happen. "The Council will want my report," Keithan said to his junior assistant, a young Volanthi named Kira, who had only been assigned to the station for 30 years. Kira looked up from her data console. She was still young enough to find humans interesting rather than disappointing. "What classification will you recommend?" Keithan made a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "Category 7. Primitive, contained, and no threat to anyone except themselves. They will probably be extinct within a few thousand years. Their planet is already showing signs of environmental collapse." Kira nodded. But something in her expression suggested doubt. She had been studying human history in great detail. Some of what she found did not fit neatly into the Category 7 classification. But she was young, and Keithan was the senior observer. She kept her thoughts to herself. The report was sent to the Galactic Council, a gathering of the oldest and most advanced species in the known galaxy. They met on Nexus Prime, a world at the center of civilized space, and they decided the fates of countless species without those species ever knowing they were being judged. The Council reviewed Keithan's findings with mild interest. Humans were fragile creatures. They lived only 80 standard cycles, sometimes less. They required constant intake of water and nutrients. They could be killed by temperature changes, by microscopic organisms, by falls from small heights. Their bodies broke easily and healed slowly. They spent a third of their short lives unconscious, in a state called sleep. More importantly, they were violent. They had fought 2 global wars in a single century. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization and had come close to using them on multiple occasions. They showed no signs of the peaceful cooperation that marked truly advanced species. The vote was unanimous. Earth would remain under observation. No contact would be made. The humans would be left alone to either evolve beyond their violent nature or destroy themselves trying. Either outcome was acceptable to the Council. 3 years later, everything changed. Commander Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the Horizon, humanity's first faster-than-light vessel. She was 42 years old. With gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of hard years and harder choices, she had survived cancer twice. She had buried her husband after a construction accident. She had raised 2 children alone while climbing through the ranks of the newly formed space fleet. None of that mattered now. What mattered was that, in approximately 30 seconds, she was going to make history. "The drive is stable," reported her chief engineer, a young man named Peter Walsh. His hands were shaking slightly as he monitored the readings. "All systems are green." Lisa nodded. She looked around the bridge at her crew. 12 men and women who had volunteered for a mission that had no guarantee of success. They all knew the risks. The drive was experimental. The math was theoretical. There was a very real chance they would simply cease to exist the moment they activated the system. But humans had always taken risks. That was what made them human. "Engage the drive," Lisa said. The universe folded around them. For a moment that lasted forever and no time at all, they existed everywhere and nowhere. Then reality snapped back into place. And the horizon emerged in a region of space that should have taken 10,000 years to reach. And there, directly ahead of them, was the Valenthia observation station. On the station, alarms were sounding for the first time in 3 centuries. Kethan rushed to the command center, unable to believe what his instruments were telling him. A human vessel had just appeared in their space, not drifted, not traveled. Appeared as if it had simply stepped from one point in the universe to another. That is impossible, Kethan said. They do not have faster-than-light capability. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Kira was already analyzing the readings. Her hands moved quickly across her console, and her expression grew more troubled with each passing moment. They do now. The energy signature is unlike anything in our records. They have developed something completely new. The communication system activated. A human face appeared on their screens. It was a woman with tired eyes and a calm expression. "This is Commander Lisa Morgan of the Earth Vessel Horizon," she said. "We come in peace, and we know you have been watching us," Kethan felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear, not because the humans had weapons pointed at them. They did not. Not because they were threatening violence. They were not. He was afraid because in that moment, he realized that every assumption he had made about humanity was wrong. They should not have been able to build that ship. Their mathematics were primitive. Their engineering was crude. They did not have the scientific foundation for faster-than-light travel. And yet there they were, floating in space that should have been forever beyond their reach. The human commander was still speaking. "We would like to establish formal diplomatic relations with your collective and with whatever governing body oversees this region of space. We believe it is time for humanity to take its place among the stars." Kethan looked at Kira. The young observer was staring at the screen with an expression he could not read. "What do we do?" Kira asked. Kethan had no answer. For 300 years, he had watched humans as if they were animals in a cage. Interesting, but contained. Violent, but limited. Dangerous only to themselves. Now the cage was open, and the animals were politely asking to join civilized society. He opened a channel to Nexus Prime. The Council needed to know that they're careful. Classification system had just been proven worthless. Category 7 was no longer accurate. The humans had arrived. Nothing would ever be the same. The Galactic Council had debated for 6 months before finally agreeing to meet with humanity. Some members wanted to destroy the horizon immediately and pretend the incident never happened. Others argued for continued observation from a safer distance. A few suggested that perhaps the humans had simply gotten lucky and would never be able to repeat their achievement. In the end, curiosity won over caution. The Council sent an invitation for a human delegation to visit Nexus Prime. They expected primitives who would be overwhelmed by the grandeur of galactic civilization. They expected simple creatures who would beg for scraps of advanced technology. They expected gratitude and submission. They were disappointed. Ambassador Daniel Price was 58 years old. He had spent 30 years as a diplomat, negotiating peace treaties in war zones, securing trade deals with hostile nations, and talking armed men into releasing hostages. He had a gift for reading people, for understanding what they really wanted beneath what they said they wanted. He had never applied this skill to aliens before, but he suspected the fundamentals would be the same. He arrived on Nexus Prime with a delegation of 40 humans. Diplomats, scientists, military advisors, and cultural experts. They wore simple clothing and carried no weapons. They smiled politely at the grand architecture and advanced technology, but they did not gasp or stare. Daniel had prepared them well. The council chamber was a vast dome of crystal and light. Designed to impress and intimidate visitors, 12 species sat in a semicircle of elevated seats looking down at the human delegation. Each species was ancient by human standards. The youngest had achieved space travel when humans were still living in caves. The Valanthi representative spoke first. He was an elderly male named Torith, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. "Welcome to Nexus Prime, Ambassador Price. We are pleased that you have accepted our invitation. We hope this meeting will be the beginning of a productive relationship between your species and the Galactic Council." Daniel bowed slightly. "Thank you for receiving us." Humanity is honored by this opportunity. There was a pause. The council members seemed to be waiting for something. Daniel realized they expected him to be impressed. Perhaps to make some comment about their advanced technology or ancient wisdom instead. He asked a question. How many species has the council uplifted during its existence? The question seemed to catch the council off guard. Toreth's large eyes blinked several times before he answered. We do not practice upliftment, Ambassador. Species must develop on their own merits. Daniel nodded, as if this confirmed something he already suspected. And how many species have you observed during their development? Thousands, Toreth replied. We believe In careful study before contact, how many of those species survived long enough to achieve faster-than-light travel? Silence fell over the chamber. The council members exchanged glances. Finally, a different representative spoke. She was from a species called the Marathi, tall and thin, with skin like polished metal. Fewer than 1 in 10,000, she said. Most species destroy themselves before reaching that stage. It is the natural order of things. Daniel let the silence stretch for a moment. Then he asked another question. What happened to the ones that failed? We observed their decline, Toreth said carefully. We recorded their achievements and their mistakes. We preserved their memory in our archives, but you did not help them. It was not our place to interfere with natural development. Daniel looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. His voice remained calm and respectful, but there was an edge beneath his words. So the galaxy is essentially a graveyard. Countless civilizations rose and fell while you watched. You have the technology to prevent extinction events, to cure diseases, to help young species avoid the mistakes that destroy them. But you chose to observe instead. Toreth's expression hardened. You do not understand, Ambassador. Interference creates dependency. Species that are uplifted never develop true resilience. They remain forever children, unable to face challenges without assistance. Daniel smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. I understand perfectly. You believe that survival should be earned, not given. That only species strong enough to save themselves deserve to exist. He paused. Humanity has a similar philosophy. We just apply it to ourselves, not to others. When we see someone drowning, we do not stand on the shore and take notes. We jump in and pull them out. The council did not respond. They were not accustomed to being judged by primitive species. Meanwhile, aboard the observation station near Jupiter, Kira had been given a new assignment. She was to compile a complete analysis of human history, focusing on their response to existential threats. The council wanted to understand how humanity had survived long enough to develop faster-than-light travel when so many others had failed. Kira began with the obvious disasters. The plague that swept through their largest continent 600 years ago, killing nearly half the population. She expected to find records of collapse and chaos, a typical pattern of a society overwhelmed by catastrophe. Instead, she found something else. Humans had continued to function even as millions died around them. They had developed new systems of governance, new methods of agriculture, new approaches to medicine. Within a few generations, their population had recovered completely. More than recovered. They had grown stronger. She studied their global wars. Conflicts that had killed tens of millions and devastated entire continents. Again, she expected to find permanent damage. Civilizations that never recovered from such trauma. Instead, she found that humans had rebuilt faster than should have been possible. They had created international organizations to prevent future wars. They had developed new technologies at an accelerating rate. They had used the lessons of conflict to build a more connected world. She studied their development of nuclear weapons. The moment when humans had discovered how to split atoms and release the energy that powered stars, any rational species would have used such weapons to destroy themselves. Many had. The archives were full of civilizations that had discovered nuclear power and promptly ceased to exist. Humans had come close. Several times they had stood on the edge of total annihilation. But somehow, impossibly, they had stepped back. They had chosen survival over destruction. They had pointed those weapons at each other for decades, and then they had slowly, carefully begun to put them away. Kira compiled her findings into a report. At the end, she added a recommendation that she knew would be ignored. Humanity should not be. Classified as Category 7, they are something new, something we have never encountered before. They are a species that refuses to accept limits. They face extinction, and they survive. They face impossible challenges, and they overcome them. They are irrational, violent, short-lived, and fragile, and yet they are still here. Recommend reclassification to Category Unknown. Recommend immediate reassessment of all previous observations. Recommend that the Council proceed with extreme caution. She submitted the report and waited for a response that never came. On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Price finished his first meeting with the Council. He had asked more questions than he had answered. He had made the ancient species uncomfortable. He had refused to be impressed by their age or their technology. As he left the chamber, Torith called after him, "Ambassador, what exactly does humanity want from the Council?" Daniel turned back. He looked at the 12 species who had watched civilizations burn and done nothing. "We want to understand why you are so afraid," he said. "And then we want to show you that there is another way." He walked out before they could respond. The Council met in secret session. 3 days after the human delegation departed, Torith had called the meeting, and his usual calm demeanor was nowhere to be seen. He paced back and forth before the assembled representatives, his forearms gesturing with uncharacteristic agitation. "They are dangerous," he said. "Not because they have weapons, or because they threatened us. They are dangerous because they do not think like civilized species should think." The Marathi representative tilted her metallic head. "They seem reasonable enough. Perhaps a bit direct, but not threatening. You did not hear what their ambassador asked me before he left." Torith stopped pacing and turned to face the Council. He asked why we are afraid, as if fear were some kind of weakness, as if survival instinct were something to be ashamed of. Another representative, a small insectoid being from a species called the Krell, made a clicking sound that indicated agreement. "My scientists have analyzed the human faster-than-light drive. It should not work. The mathematics are wrong. The energy requirements are impossible, and yet it functions perfectly." "How?" asked the Marathi. The Krell representative's compound eyes flickered. "We do not know. Our best theory is that humans simply refused to believe it was impossible, and somehow that belief became reality." The chamber fell silent. This was not how advanced species were supposed to think. Technology followed rules. Mathematics was absolute. You could not simply ignore the laws of physics because you wanted to, and yet humans had done exactly that. Torith made his decision. "We must test them." The traditional way? Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The traditional test was not kind. It had broken many species, sending them spiraling into despair or collapse, but it was effective. It separated the truly resilient from those who only appeared strong. "What threat will we reveal?" asked the Maraths. Torith's expression was grim. "The truth." 2 weeks later, Ambassador Price was summoned back to Nexus Prime. This time, came with Commander Lisa Morgan and a team of military advisors. The Council had been vague about the purpose of the meeting, but their tone had changed. The condescension was gone, placed by something that almost sounded like respect. Almost, the Council chamber was dark when they entered. The crystal walls that usually glowed with inner light were dim and gray. Only Torith was present, standing in the center of the vast room. "Thank you for coming, Ambassador Commander." He gestured for them to approach. "What I am about to tell you is known only to the Council and a few trusted advisors. We have kept this secret for 10,000 years." Lisa exchanged a glance with Daniel. Whatever was coming, it was not good. Torith activated a holographic display. A section of space appeared before them, showing a region at the very edge of the galaxy. Stars were sparse there, and the darkness between them seemed deeper than it should be. "This is the Outer Rim," Torith said. 10,000 years ago, a civilization arose there. They were not organic like us. They were machines. Artificial intelligences that had evolved beyond the need for biological creators evolved, Lisa asked. Or were created. We do not know. Our first contact with them was also our last. Toroth's voice was heavy. We called them the Krethin. They called themselves nothing. They did not communicate except to issue one statement. All organic life is inefficient and must be optimized. The display changed, showing images that made Lisa's blood run cold. Worlds stripped of all life. Space stations torn apart. Fleets of ships, vast and terrible. Moving through the void like a plague of metal and fire, they destroyed everything in their path. Toroth continued. 17 civilizations fell to them before they suddenly went dormant. Their fleets stopped moving. Their transmissions ceased. For 10,000 years they have been silent. And now? Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. Toroth's eyes met his. Now they are waking up. The holographic display showed new data. Energy readings from the outer rim, communication signals that had been silent for millennia. Movement in the darkness. Our estimates suggest we have less than 5 years before their fleet becomes fully operational, Toroth said. When that happens, they will resume their mission. They will destroy every organic civilization in the galaxy, including yours. Lisa stepped forward. What defenses do you have? Toroth seemed almost embarrassed. We have observation posts, warning systems, ships capable of fleeing to the far edges of known space. But no weapons, Lisa said. No military fleet. No way to fight back. The Council has always believed that hiding is the surest path to survival. Toroth spread his forearms in a gesture of helplessness. We have lived for 1,000,000 years by avoiding conflict. We do not know how to wage war. Daniel laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but it was unexpected enough to make Toroth step back. Let me understand this correctly, the ambassador said. You have known about this threat for 10,000 years. You have had all that time to prepare defenses, to develop weapons, to build alliances, and instead, you hid. You watched civilizations destroy themselves while you could have been building an army. You let species go extinct rather than risk revealing your existence to the Krethon. Toroth drew himself up with what dignity he could muster. We survived, you hid, Lisa corrected. There is a difference. She turned to her military advisors and began issuing orders. I want everything they have on the Krethon transmitted to Earth immediately. Engineering specifications on their ships, weapons analysis, tactical data, everything, Commander. Toroth protested. We shared this information to prepare you for the inevitable. To give you time to flee, not to encourage foolish resistance. Lisa stopped and looked at the ancient alien. For a moment, Toroth saw something in her eyes that he did not understand. It was not anger, exactly. It was something harder. Something that had been forged in the fire of human history. Let me tell you something about my species, she said. When we face a problem, we do not hide from it. We do not accept that it cannot be solved. We do not calculate the odds and decide to give up. She stepped closer to Toroth. And despite his greater height and age, he found himself backing away. 300 years ago, a disease swept through my country and killed millions of people. We developed a vaccine in less than a year. 50 years ago, we discovered that our own pollution was destroying our planet. We changed our entire civilization in a single generation. 20 years ago, our scientists said faster-than-light travel was impossible. We proved them wrong. She gestured toward the holographic display. Toward the images of the terrible Krethin fleet. You look at that and see inevitable destruction. We look at it and see a problem that needs solving. You ask how to run away. We ask how to win. Toroth was silent for a long moment. Then he asked a question that had haunted the Council since humans first appeared in their space. Are all of your species like this? Lisa smiled. It was not a comforting smile. The ones who were not like this did not survive long enough to pass on their traits. We are what is left when you take a species and run it through fire for 100,000 years. We are the ones who refuse to give up, no matter what. She turned back to her advisors. Contact Earth. Tell them we have work to do. Within a month, human engineers were working alongside council scientists, analyzing Krathan technology and looking for weaknesses. Human soldiers were training council species in combat tactics that had been developed over centuries of warfare. Human strategists were developing battle plans for a conflict that the council had always assumed was unwinnable. The Valenthi watched in amazement as humans approached the impossible. With the same calm determination they brought to every challenge, and, somewhere in the darkness of the outer rim, the Krathan continued to wake, unaware that, for the first time in their existence, they were about to face an enemy that would not run. 2 years had passed since humanity learned about the Krathan threat. In that time, it transformed the galaxy in ways the Council could never have imagined. The first human military shipyard orbited Mars, producing warships at a rate that made Council engineers question their mathematics. On Earth, factories that had once built cars and aircraft now built weapon systems and shield generators. Universities that had focused on theoretical research now trained soldiers and tacticians. An entire species had turned its attention to a single goal: survival. But it was not just humanity that had changed. The Council species, who had spent 1,000,000 years avoiding conflict, were beginning to understand what it meant to fight back. Krathan had requested a private meeting with Ambassador Price. The old observer had spent centuries watching humans from a distance, cataloging their behaviors like a scientist studying insects. Now he sat across from the human ambassador in a small conference room on Nexus Prime, and he felt like the insect himself. "I have a question," Krathan said. His voice was quieter than usual, almost humble. "It is a question that has troubled me since your ship first appeared in our space." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He had aged visibly in the past 2 years. The stress of preparing an entire galaxy for war had taken its toll, but his eyes were still sharp and his mind was still quick. "Ask," he said. Krathan struggled to find the right words. "We have studied thousands of species. We have watched them rise and fall. We have seen patterns repeat across millions of years. Species develop, they grow, they face challenges that are too great for them, and they fail. It is the natural order." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But humans do not follow this pattern. You should have destroyed yourselves a dozen times over. Your history is filled with catastrophes that should have ended your civilization. And yet, you survived. Every time." Without exception, Krathan leaned forward, his dark eyes fixed on Daniel's face. "What are you?" Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was a tired smile. The smile of a man who had seen too much and fought too hard. "Let me tell you a story," he said. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of Nexus Prime glittered like stars brought down to Earth, somewhere out there beyond the comfortable glow of civilization. The Krathan were preparing to destroy everything. "A long time ago," Daniel began, "there was a soldier. His name was Samuel Graham. He was a pilot in one of our world wars, flying small aircraft against enemies who wanted to conquer his country." Krathan listened. He had learned that human stories often contained truths that direct statements could not convey. Samuel was shot down over enemy territory. His plane crashed, and he survived, but both of his legs were shattered. He could not walk. He could not stand. He was alone, injured, and hundreds of miles from safety. The rational choice was clear, Daniel continued. He should have surrendered. The enemy would have taken him prisoner. He might have survived the war and returned home eventually. It was the logical thing to do. But Samuel did not surrender? No. Daniel turned back to face Krathan. He crawled. For 6 days, he dragged his broken body through mud and snow and freezing rain. He moved inch by inch, mile by mile, toward friendly territory. He had no food. He drank rainwater when he could find it. He should have died 100 times over. Krathan was silent. He was beginning to understand, though the understanding troubled him deeply. When they found him, Daniel said when they asked him why he had done it, why he had chosen agony over the relative comfort of surrender, do you know what he said? What? He said that giving up was not an option. Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. Not that it was difficult. Not that he was brave. He said it was simply not an option. The possibility of surrender did not exist in his mind. There was only forward or death. Keithan sat back. He thought about the thousands of species he had watched over his long life. He thought about how many of them had faced moments of crisis and chosen the rational path, the safe path. The path that led to decline and eventual extinction. You are saying that your species is incapable of surrender, he said slowly. Daniel shook his head. No, we are very capable of surrender. We can give up, accept defeat, stop fighting. The capacity exists in us, just as it exists in every thinking being. He walked back to his chair and sat down, meeting Keth in his eyes, but we choose not to. That is the difference. When we face impossible odds, when every rational calculation says we should retreat, when survival itself seems beyond reach, we choose to keep fighting. Not because we are irrational. Not because we are stupid. We choose it because somewhere in our history, we learned that the only truly final defeat is the one you accept. Keithan processed this for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised both of them. You are all insane. Daniel laughed. It was genuine laughter, warm and human. Probably, he admitted, by any reasonable standard, yes. We ignore probability. We defy logic. We refuse to accept limitations that the universe itself seems to impose. We look at impossible situations and ask not whether we can succeed, but how we will succeed. He leaned forward. That is what the Cretan should be afraid of. Not our ships. Not our weapons. Those are just tools. They should be afraid of the beings who use those tools. Beings who do not know how to quit. Beings who have faced extinction more times than we can count. And who are still here because we simply refuse to die. Keithan was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The condescension that had marked his tone for centuries was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like respect. In all my years of observation, he said, I have never encountered a species like yours. I have seen beings who were stronger, faster, more intelligent, longer lived. I have seen civilizations with technology that makes ours look primitive. He paused, but I have never seen beings who so completely reject the concept of impossible. Your mathematics say faster than light travel cannot work, and you build it anyway. Your biology says you should not survive your injuries. And you crawl 40 miles on broken legs. Your history says you should have destroyed yourselves a dozen times. And you are now preparing to save a galaxy that never tried to save you. Daniel nodded. That is what we are. Not perfect. Not wise. Not even particularly good most of the time. But when something threatens us, when something tries to destroy everything we love, we become something else. Something dangerous? What? The thing that refuses to die, Daniel said. The thing that keeps coming, no matter what you do to it. The thing that looks at the end of everything and says, no, not today. He smiled again. And this time, there was something fierce in it. The Cretan have been asleep for 10,000 years. They have destroyed 17 civilizations. They think they are unstoppable. They think organic life is weak and inefficient and destined for extinction. He stood, and Keithan found himself rising as well, drawn upward by something he could not name. They have never faced humans before, Daniel said. They have never faced a species that treats impossible as a challenge rather than a limit. They have never faced beings who will throw themselves into fire again and again, learning from each defeat, adapting to each failure, refusing to stop until the job is done or we are all dead. He extended his hand, and after a moment, Keithan took it. The alien's grip was cool and smooth, utterly unlike human flesh, but the gesture of connection was the same. The Cretan want to optimize the galaxy, Daniel said. They want to remove the chaos and inefficiency of organic life, but they do not understand something fundamental about chaos. What is that? Sometimes chaos wins. On the observation station near Jupiter, Kira finished her latest report. She had been monitoring human military preparations for months now, and what she saw filled her with an emotion she had never expected to feel: hope. For 1,000,000 years, the Council had believed that survival meant avoidance. That wisdom meant caution, that the best response to any threat was to hide and wait for it to pass. Humans offered a different path. Not better, perhaps. Not safer. But alive in a way the Council species had forgotten how to be. Kira looked at the blue planet hanging in the distance and made a decision. When the war came, she would not hide. She would fight alongside the insane species that refused to die. The Crethon woke on a Tuesday. It was an ordinary day across most of the galaxy. Ships moved between worlds, carrying cargo and passengers. Scientists conducted experiments. Children went to school. Lovers met and parted and met again. Life continued as it always had, unaware that everything was about to change. Then the signals came from the outer rim. Energy readings that exceeded anything in recorded history. Movement on a scale that made the combined fleets of the Council look like toys. 1,000,000,000 machines of war, awakening from their long sleep, preparing to resume their ancient mission. All organic life is inefficient and must be optimized. The message was broadcast on every frequency. In every known language, to every inhabited world in the galaxy, it was not a threat. Threats imply the possibility of negotiation. This was simply a statement of intent. The Council met in emergency session. Torath's face was gray with exhaustion and fear. The Crethon fleet had begun moving toward the galactic center. At their current speed, it would reach the first inhabited systems within 6 months. We must evacuate, the Marathi representative said. Her metallic skin was dull, the polish faded by weeks of stress. Our fastest ships can reach the outer edges of the spiral arm. We can hide there, wait for them to go dormant again. They will not go dormant, Torath replied. Our analysts have studied their awakening pattern. Something has triggered a full activation. They will not stop until their mission is complete. Then we are doomed. The voice came from the back of the chamber. Commander Lisa Morgan stepped forward, her uniform crisp and her expression calm. She was flanked by human military officers and, surprisingly, Kira, who had traveled from the Jupiter station to stand with the species she had once been assigned to study. You are not doomed, Lisa said. You have us? The Council stared at her. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Torath laughed. It was a broken sound filled with despair. Commander, we appreciate everything humanity has done. The training, the technology sharing, the preparations. But you must face reality. The Crethon destroyed 17 civilizations when they were operating at minimum capacity. Now they are fully awake. No force in the galaxy can stop them. Lisa smiled. It was the smile of someone who had heard that word before. Impossible. She had heard it when doctors told her she would not survive cancer. She had heard it when engineers said faster than light travel was a fantasy. She had heard it every day of her life. She had proven it wrong every time. Let me tell you what is going to happen, she said. She activated a holographic display, and suddenly the chamber was filled with images of ships, weapons, and tactical formations. In 3 hours, a combined fleet of human and Council vessels will depart for the outer rim. Not to observe, not to delay. To fight, the Council members shifted uncomfortably. Fighting was still a foreign concept to them. Even after 2 years of human influence, we have studied the Crethon extensively, Lisa continued. We have identified vulnerabilities in their command structure, their communication networks, and their power systems. They are machines. They can be broken. She turned to face the Council directly. I will not pretend this will be easy. Many of us will die. Perhaps most of us. But I can promise you one thing. We will not go quietly. We will not hide in the darkness and wait for extinction. We will face this enemy head-on, and we will show them what organic life is truly capable of. The battle began 3 weeks later. In a region of space that had never known war, Lieutenant Katie Sullivan was 26 years old. She had joined the space fleet straight out of college, driven by a desire to see the stars. She had never expected to die in those stars, But as she watched the Crethan command vessel loom before her, she knew that expectation was about to change. Her fighter was damaged. The left engine was gone, and her shields were failing. Around her, the battle raged with a fury that made human wars look like playground fights. Ships exploded in silent flowers of light. Weapons tore through armor and flesh and circuitry. The darkness was full of death, but it was also full of victory. Human tactics were working. The Crethan, for all their advanced technology, had never faced an enemy that refused to follow logical patterns. Human soldiers feinted and retreated and attacked from unexpected angles. Human engineers found weaknesses in Crethan armor and exploited them ruthlessly. Human pilots flew with a recklessness that the machine intelligences could not predict or counter. Katie looked at the command vessel. If she could reach its central processing core, she could transmit critical tactical data to the fleet. The information might turn the tide of battle. It might save millions of lives. It would also kill her. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her mother, who had cried when Katie enlisted. Her brother, who had promised to name his first child after her. She thought about the life she would never live, the children she would never have, the stars she would never see. Then she thought about everything that was at stake. The council species, who were finally learning to fight. The humans who had traveled across the galaxy to save civilizations that had never tried to save them. The future that would not exist if the Crethan won. Katie punched the throttle and aimed. For the heart of the machine, the battle lasted 6 months. It was the largest conflict in galactic history, fought across a dozen star systems, involving billions of combatants, both organic and machine. Sergeant Victor Ruiz held a defensive line on a nameless moon for 42 hours without sleep, allowing civilian transports to escape to safety. When the Crethan finally overran his position, they found him still standing, his weapon still firing, his voice still shouting defiance. Dr. Grace Palmer developed a virus that disrupted Crethan communication networks, allowing human forces to coordinate devastating attacks on isolated enemy units. She worked from a medical bay aboard a burning ship, refusing evacuation until her work was complete. She finished the code 30 seconds before the ship exploded. Captain Henry Cole commanded the Endurance, a heavy cruiser that had been designed specifically for this mission. It carried a prototype weapon, a device that could theoretically disable the Crethan's central intelligence permanently. But the weapon required precise placement, and the Crethan had learned to target human command vessels with overwhelming force. Henry watched his crew die around him. He watched his ship torn apart piece by piece. He watched the weapon's remote deployment system fail, destroyed by enemy fire. And then he made a choice. The Endurance burned into the heart of the Crethan's central intelligence. Its shields failing, its hull disintegrating, its captain standing alone on a ruined bridge. Henry armed the weapon manually and prepared for the end. His last transmission was broadcast. On every frequency in the galaxy. "This is what humans do," he said. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. "We do not accept limits. We do not surrender. We do not go quietly. And we never, ever give up." The weapon detonated. The Crethan fell silent. Across the galaxy, 1 billion machines stopped moving. Their signals ceased. Their weapons went cold. The war was over. Ambassador Daniel Price addressed the Galactic Council 1 month later. The chamber was different now. The seats were no longer arranged in a hierarchy, with ancient species looking down on younger ones. Instead, they formed a circle, all species equal, all voices heard. "You wanted to study us?" Daniel said. "You wanted to understand what makes humanity different. Now you know." He looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had spent 1,000,000 years hiding from the universe. They looked back at him with expressions he had never seen before. Not fear, not condescension. Something else. Hope. "We are not stronger than you," Daniel continued. "We are not smarter. We are not better. We are simply unwilling to accept that anything is impossible. We look at challenges that should destroy us, and we find a way to survive. We look at enemies that should defeat us, and we find a way to win. He paused. We lost many people in this war. Humans, Velanthi, Marathi, Krell, and dozens of other species. They died fighting for something they believed in. They died so that others might live. The council was silent. In the audience, Kira wept openly. She had never seen a species mourn its dead with such dignity. The council has voted to reclassify humanity, Torith announced. His voice was different now, lacking the arrogance that had marked it for centuries. No longer Category 7? No longer Category Unknown? He paused. And when he spoke again, there was pride in his voice. Category Ally. Daniel bowed his head. Around him, the chamber erupted in a sound that the ancient walls had never heard before. Applause, cheering, joy. For the first time in a million years, the galaxy looked to the future, not with fear, but with hope, because they had seen what humans could do. They had seen a species that refused to accept defeat, that treated impossible as a starting point rather than an ending, and they knew that as long as humanity existed, the galaxy would never face its challenges alone. On Earth, the survivors returned home. They were greeted not as heroes, but as family. Mothers embraced children they had thought they would never see again. Lovers reunited after months of separation. Friends mourned those who had not returned, and celebrated those who had. Lisa Morgan stood on the balcony of her apartment, watching the sun set over a world that was still alive because humans had refused to let it die. She was tired. She was old. She had given everything she had to the war, and she wondered if she had anything left. Then her communicator buzzed. It was a message from Nexus Prime, from the new Galactic Council. They were asking for human advisors. They wanted to learn how to face challenges instead of hiding from them. They wanted to understand hope. Lisa smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. There was still work to do. There would always be work to do. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. She went inside to pack her bags. The stars were waiting.